Hello, this is Paul Chek, and I'm here with you on YouTube to answer Sal's first question. Sal asked me about fantasizing and whether or not it has a negative effect on the individual if you fantasize negatively or sexually about another person. Well, Sal, it really depends on your own individual philosophy. I can only share with you my philosophy on that. If you are fantasizing about somebody negatively or thinking about them negatively, then as you implied with your question, yes, the chances are very, very good you're producing negative energy. I'm going to give you something to work with here. Space is yin and yang. So think of matter, if you just took matter and made it finer and finer and finer. So you chop it all down, you get to an atom. Well, if you chop it further down behind the atom, you get to these yin and yang charges that are infinitely fine. It's called the Akashic Field. According to the book Science in the Akashic Field by Lustful, it's about 800 times more dense than steel with a friction coefficient of 0. Now, that might sound pretty wild. So we're kind of like fish that don't know that we're in water. But because the friction coefficient is 0, you don't feel yourself moving through this sort of liquid steel. Now, with that in mind, think of what happens when you shoot a cue ball at a rack of billiard balls. You hit the rack, and they kind of explode, and of course the goal is to get one in the pocket, so the harder you hit the balls and the more tightly racked they are, the more movement you get. Now, thought is energy. They can measure that with an electroencephalogram. Thought, according to scientific research, moves at the speed of light. The average human being, according to Deepak Chopra, has 68,000 thoughts a day, most of which are negative, unfortunately. So now what I want you to think of is that instead of shooting a cue ball at the rack of balls, that every thought you think is kind of like a cue ball, and it hits space. And because the thought is a polarized reality. For example, you can't think of hot unless you know what cold is. You can't think of love unless you have a sense of not love. Otherwise, none of your thoughts would have any meaning. So the mind is an is and an isn't machine. So whenever you're fantasizing, you're actually generating electromagnetic energy which conditions space around you. The more energy and the more emotion you put on the thought, the more you condition space around you. And since space is infinitely dense, here's where it gets cool. Remember, if you're shooting at a ball and you hit it just right, it goes in the pocket. So if you're fantasizing about someone specific, we'll just call her Sally. To the degree that you're attaching yourself to the thought of Sally, and to the degree that your thoughts are on Sally, then you're actually charging space, and because space is infinitely dense, you're moving Sally's energy field with your thoughts, with your fantasies, and with your emotions. So think of the thought like the charge, and think of the emotion like the magnitude of the charge. So if you're really angry at someone, you're walking around and go, that guy's a real asshole, and you're pissed off, then you're really moving their energy field, and yes, you're really having an effect on them, and you're creating what are called probability lines. You're creating energy lines through space. You're actually attaching yourself to them. If you think anyone's a real asshole and you're really about it, well, you are doing what's called entanglement in quantum physics. You're actually entangling your energy with theirs by making that statement and directing it toward them. If you're fantasizing about somebody, maybe your school teacher or somebody that you work with, maybe they're married, and you're thinking, oh, I bet you she'd be good in bed, and you're just sort of having fun. It's a loose charge. Now, if the fantasy is complementary, and you're clear about who you're thinking about, then you're just essentially giving them a very, very sensual compliment. So, really, it's up to you to be the judge as to whether or not you're entangling yourself with somebody in a negative way. And a real simple technique is this. Just close your eyes and think any thought about somebody else. And if you think a thought that's negative, or derogatory, or judgmental, you will actually feel it makes your body feel heavy and dense. It weighs you down. because judgments have weight, right? If the judge says you're going to jail, that's got weight. If someone says you're ugly, that's got weight. To the degree that you believe them and you feel it, it's got weight. So if you're fantasizing about someone and you're thinking, boy, they're so beautiful, as a matter of fact, the fact that you're fantasizing about someone's kind of a compliment, because most people don't fantasize sexually about people that aren't attractive, do they? So the reality of it is, you create probability lines and you create entanglement. So the conclusion to your question is, think the thoughts about the people in the way that you're willing to be entangled with. And if you only entangle yourself with people in a way that you would enjoy, and you're being ethical about it, then your thoughts will always produce better things for others. And since there's nobody here but you, Sal, think about that, then think about yourself the way you want to think. I'll come back with the answer to your next question, but before I go, I would like to give you a tip. There is a great book called The Book of Secrets by Osho, O-S-H-O. If you do a little Google search or a YouTube search on Osho, you'll find lots of stuff. He is probably the most recent mystic, true spiritual mystic that lived on this planet, at least that we know about, or that I know about. And there's a ton of information addressing this kind of stuff in his books and in his audios and videos. Try the Book of Secrets. It's special. Thanks, Sal.